Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you at our digital version of the Lumix Festival 2020. My name is Martin and I'm part of the Lumix team. I hope you can hear me well. Okay, then I start. Okay. For the first time, our photo festival took place in 2008. Since then, we have seen many impressive photo and multimedia reportages from all over the world, and we met up and coming journalists and artists on our festival grounds in Hanover. This year, everything turned out a bit different. As many other cultural events, we had to improvise and had to find a way to transform this analog festival into a digital one. Now we are very happy to present you a wide program, including these live talks, where we focus each day on a different topic. The motto is 10 days, 10 topics. On our website, you can find over 80 projects from photographers from all over the world. The approaches, visual languages, and formats are as diverse as the authors themselves. The website is available at lumix-festival.de. And today we'd like to give our attention to the storytellers of the future and the question of how we can develop challenging and self-reflective approaches that provide knowledge of how to reflect on the billions of images we are exposed in these days. And also we want to discuss how new media and internet can enable more participatory approaches of storytelling. Maybe some of you already attended the talk this afternoon, where Karen Fromm, our festival coordinator, spoke with Fred Ritchen, the former dean of the International Center of Photography School in New York. If you haven't seen it yet, then just visit our YouTube channel, where we all upload our live talks. Tonight, we are very pleased that Misha Vallejo will launch the brand new interactive website of his project Secret Sarayaku at our festival, and that we could win Paul Lowe for the further moderation. I briefly want to introduce Paul to you, and then he will take over. And later on, I will have a look at the Q&A box and will pass over your questions to our guests. Dr. Paul Lowe is an award-winning photographer, and he's the course leader of the master's program Photojournalism and Documentary Photography at London College of Communication. In the last decades, Paul covered breaking news across the world, including the fall of the Berlin Wall, Nelson Mandela's release, famine in Africa, the conflict in the former Yugoslavia, and the destruction of Grozny. His work was published in many prestigious magazines and newspapers around the world. Besides his assignments, Paul worked as an author, critic, and educator. His research interests focus on the representation of conflict in photography and the ethical issues this raises. Here in Hanover, we are very lucky that Paul was participating at our symposium, Images in Conflict, in 2017. That's also why we asked Paul for another collaboration for our festival. During our research, we stumbled upon the information that 5 years ago, Paul was the former course leader of Misha Vallejo in London. Therefore, I would say I hand over to Paul for introducing Misha. Hello, Misha. Hello, Paul. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Martin. Thank you very much to the festival, to Lumix, for hosting this. It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Misha. Obviously, you know, we work with a lot of students and participants on our program, and many have gone on to be really exceptional photographers, and Misha's absolutely part of that great group. Originally from Ecuador. I remember his project extremely well, and it's a great privilege to see how that project emerged into a really fully formed body of work that was published as a book, and he's continued that. So I'm really excited to catch up with him, see what he's been doing in the meantime. I think he's been doing some really innovative work, which is kind of right on that cutting edge of how documentary, photojournalism, fine art, multimedia, books, how they all kind of intertwine with a very personal and very individual vision. So I'm really, really excited to introduce Misha and to have this conversation with him. I do apologize about my glasses. I'm getting a little bit older. My eyesight has gone. So unfortunately, I have to leave them on, and that's the screen reflecting off me. I've tried multiple ways to get rid of it. So maybe I need to buy myself some non-reflecting glasses for this online world. But anyway, I'm going to hand over to you, Misha, to to talk us through the project you're going to launch, which I think is this the world premiere then effectively of the work?
Yeah. Hello. So this is the international premiere, more or less. I already launched it last week, just like in Ecuador, but now it's like the international.
Great, that's a great privilege. Thank you very much for sharing it with us. And by the way, if anyone has any questions, please do type them into the Q&A box, and I will keep an eye on them and we'll moderate those and hopefully pass them on to Misha. So please do try and interact. I think that's really one of the great things about these platforms. You get a chance to really ask questions and communicate with the presenters. So Misha, anyway, go over to you.
Hi, hello Paul, hello Mark, for to all the people at the Lumix Festival. It's a bit strange to make a festival like online, but I don't know, those are the times we live in. So I thought, okay, this is a great opportunity to launch another online project. So first thing, I would like to mention the institutions that supported this project. Without them, this might never have happened. So the Prince Claus Fund from the Netherlands and the Goethe Institute from Germany with a grant, the Culture Ministry of Ecuador with another grant, the Organization of Ibero-American States with a sponsorship, Sinchi Foundation from, with another sponsorship, and this project was partly developed at the Docking Station Artist in Residency in Amsterdam. So I am Misha Vallejo. I am an audiovisual storyteller from Ecuador. And I come from a country that does not make it often to the news. And when it does, it is often because of the wrong reasons. Like, for instance, this past couple of weeks, the poor response to the COVID crisis. So the traditional media does not often pay attention to what is going on here. Let me share my screen with you. Okay. So as I mentioned, I come from Ecuador, and my interests as a storyteller revolve around environmental and social issues. And I try to research them from a more humanistic and perhaps even more resilient point of view. And that does not always resonate with traditional media. So following this path of optimistic, resilient environmental project, I'd like to share with you the interactive web documentary Secret Sarayaku. Sarayaku is an indigenous community from the Ecuadorian Amazon rainforest. And I first got interested in this community in 2012 after I heard the news that this community won an international lawsuit against the Ecuadorian government for entering their territory without permission in order to look for oil and start exploration to dig oil in that rainforest. So they won the lawsuit at the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and it was quite a big issue for indigenous communities around the globe. So in 2015, I gained permission to enter their land, and at the beginning, my interest came from an activist perspective, as I was focused on using photography to document their everyday life and in a way document their fight against climate change. But with the time, with all of these years, my interest developed into a research of their worldview, of a philosophy called in Quechua Causacsacha, which may be translated as the living forest. So the living forest states that the Amazon rainforest is a living entity and it bears the same rights as a human being. It also states that all the elements within the rainforest, be it, I don't know, the water, the rain, the soil, the human beings, the animals, the plants, all of them have a spirit, are alive, and are interconnected one to the other. So if you damage any of them, the damage will return and affect all the other elements involved. So with this information, it became clear to me that photography alone cannot convey all of this complexity, all of these several phases of this story. So this is why I decided to start working also with video, with audio, making interviews, using texts and illustrations. And one important aspect in the life of this community is the use of Western technology in order to communicate their ancestral message. So what they do is they have satellite internet access in their community, and they are avid users of social media in order to spread their message of environmental protection and protection of the land and protection of the Amazon rainforest. So they have become a sort of cyber activists. So they use Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. They even have a memes page of which I am a top fan. And they do it, they want to get known both nationally and internationally, not out of vanity, but in order to survive. So in an interview with Heriberto Gualinga, which is one of the members of the community, and this interview is also included in the web documentary, he says that the community wants to get known because in this way, it is much harder for them to get disappeared, either by the government or the oil company. So social media for them is a means of survival. But obviously this communication through the internet with the outside world works in both ways. So there's a lot of influence from the Western world in their own everyday lives, in their own traditions, and especially in the lives of the younger generation. So like as an example, it is common now to see young people listening to reggaeton or cumbia in their cell phones in the middle of the jungle. So by following this idea of the community sharing their knowledge through the internet, I thought, okay, maybe I can expand from it and also use all of this material that I have accumulated in the last 5 years. And I decided to compile everything in an interactive web documentary that I want to show you. So I'll just switch over here. So the address to the web documentary is secretsarayaku.net, and when you enter, this is like the first page. So right now, I would encourage the people that are listening at home at their computers to enter this website, secretsarayaku.net, and start navigating. And you can listen to this talk while you navigate. So in this way, we can do sort of like a live podcast or something like that. And maybe you can come up with questions and doubts or comments or anything. So as you see, the narrative in this website is split into 6 chapters. And the themes of this chapter, they vary. So for instance, the first chapter speaks about all of this chapter speak about the cycle of life as a human being. And the first chapter speaks about the birth and how not only the birth of the individual, but the birth of the community, and how does the community position themselves within the world and within the rainforest. The second chapter speaks about infancy. So in the jungle, the children have to grow up really fast because they have responsibilities when they are quite young. For instance, the boys start to hunt at the age of 7, 8 years old. The girls start to cook and taking care of their siblings at the same age. The third chapter is about the teenagers of Sarayaku. their identity as indigenous people and their relationship to technology. So they are the ones that use the technology the most. And also it explores a bit of their relationship to the outside world, to the Western world. The fourth chapter is about the adulthood and the traditions and everyday life as a community in the rainforest. The fifth chapter speaks about old age and the ancestral wisdom and these myths, ways of protecting the rainforest with the help of mythological beings such as the Sacharunakuna, which are these beings that help the Quechua people protect the rainforest. The sixth chapter speaks about the future of humanity and also about death. But the narrative of this website is not linear, so you can start whenever you want. And each chapter, in each chapter, you will have to face decisions on which path of the story you would like to follow. So the narrative is more or less split like a spider web, and with many nodes inside, and you will have to face the decision as a user, where do I want to go, if I want to get this detour or just follow the same path. And it's made as if it is like in the jungle. So in the jungle, you always have these small paths and you have to face the decision, where do I want to go next? And there is a possibility that you may get lost. So in this digital jungle, you can also get lost. And that's part of it, that's part of the experience. So every time that you enter the web and you take a different turn, a different detour, you made up in places that you were not expecting to be, and get new information that you didn't have before. Another conceptual important element is that ancestral knowledge and Western traditional knowledge are on the same level, of importance in this website. So I had the permission of the community to use their own texts on how they see themselves and the world, and put them together with statistics and traditional journalistic texts. And so, as I said before, in order to tell this really, really complex story, I have used photography, sounds, video, audio interviews, contemplative videos, illustrations, texts, music and audiovisual material made by the community itself, and even intervened analog photographs. So I invite you to discover all of them. Some of the elements are a bit hidden, but I don't know, maybe you can start as a treasure hunt to try to discover where are the analog photographs, because they are a bit hidden. So right now I'd like to show you a little bit of how can you navigate this site. It's really quick. The thing is that you should navigate by your own and get lost on your own. So we can start in this chapter, for instance. The navigation is made like in any social media. You can turn on or turn off the captions. You can just follow like the first path. You can turn on the ambient sound, which is an ambient sound of the jungle, which some people already told me that find it a bit soothing. So people have also meditated with this sound in the background. And then you get also video.
Ayun kay preparados ko sang gadino ga mana fakta ga kay internet sa mituniga ang yanchi karingaguna ni kanja changaguna chi karo lakta mawa iluguna y noticia una te shanga y teléfono gang mi chasnalata ay luguna na kunga por medio de internet kay mosho gluksho una te changa chi bal kay technology.
And then, as you can see here, this is one of the detours that you may take. There are outside links, external links, sorry, to other parts of information. For instance, you can go to the, I don't know, to the memes page, navigate here, or you can enter the blog, the Sarayaku Youngsters Association blog, which is also part of this project. This blog is part of the same web, and it's controlled by the communications department and the Young People's Association of Sarayaku. It is also connected to an Instagram account, which is Everyday Sarayaku, which will also be controlled by the communications department of that indigenous community. And then if you can just follow up the navigation, you can take also shortcuts. For instance, I don't know, you can jump to another slide if you already know where do you want to go. And here, these are the notes that I was speaking earlier, where you can make the decision just to go with this chapter or to jump to another slide and see another take on this subject. And then you can, again, take another detour and go to another chapter. And now, as you can see by this icon here, you are not in the first chapter that we entered, but we have jumped to another one. So this is more or less the navigation essentials for this website. And this project, Secret Sarayaku, I consider to be a transmedia project because it does not only consist of this web documentary that you are seeing here, but it is also a book, which I have one copy of it here, or you can also see it in the website. This book is more artistic or subjective take on a narrower subject, which are these mythological beings that protect the jungle and the symbiosis with the contemporary means of communication. Then another part of the project will be a podcast that will be produced, is now currently being produced and will be ready in July, August of this year. The podcast is a fiction. It consists of several fictional narratives based on stories from the community. And then there will be also an exhibition planned to be launched later this year in Quito at the Contemporary Arts Center. And hopefully in the future, it can travel abroad, I don't know, to Europe, to the States, wherever. And so each of these elements expands the narrative of this project. The web is a bit, it's a more journalistic take and a broader take. The book is a bit more subjective. The exhibition will be immersive, and the podcast is a fictional narrative. So yeah, I think I have explained like the basics of the website. You can just navigate here. Just one more thing. So I was working closely to the community in developing this website, and there is also a get involved button here where you can, if you will, you can make donations, which will go to the communications department of Sarayaku, so that they can keep on documenting their own lives, and I won't get involved. Yeah. Okay, so I don't know if you guys have any questions or comments or.
Great, thank you, Misha. That was really fascinating. Yeah, I'm interested in this participatory collaborative aspect of it, because I think, you know, as photographers, obviously we have our own point of view, our own position, but I think increasingly we're having to take account that we have to respect the people that we're photographing, and they're not just subjects for our camera. They're actually active participants in making their own stories, their own histories. So how do you approach that, in the field, in your research, and then obviously with a project like this, you're clearly working with the community. But how do you balance that tension between your own independent artistic and documentary vision and the rights and the values, as it were, of the people that you're photographing? You're working in very intimate situations very often. So how do you kind of navigate the complexity of that relationship?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So right now, I have always been questioning myself as a storyteller, and going to other communities that are not my own, on how can I tell their stories in order to be more honest, because I know my gaze is like an outsider's point of view. And when I was there with time, we were discussing the same issues with the people of the community. And this is really nice because they have a communications department and they are quite aware of these problems. And so we came with this collaborative aspect. So the first time I went there, they asked me, okay, you are going to receive knowledge, ancestral knowledge. What are you going to give in return? So that was like a really good question. And then I said, okay, I'm a photographer. I can give any kind of workshop or photography or whatever. And then we agreed. The first time I made pictures for their medicinal plant catalog. And then I gave a couple of workshops on cell phone photography, because all the youngsters have cell phones already. And it was like a means to exchange knowledge. And then so that they can also take over this everyday Sarayaku Instagram account and take over the blog. And so these were always, these ideas came always through conversations with them. So they are not only my ideas, a lot of them are theirs. And it is really, really interesting to combine both. So I know I have like a bias, I have like my own point of view, and it is really, really important for me so that they can also communicate how they see themselves. And it is quite interesting. One of the interviews with this Heriberto Gualinga, who is a filmmaker from Sarayaku, and it's in the website, and he more or less criticizes this aspect. So he says that for him, it is really important that indigenous communities have the opportunity to communicate what is happening to them by themselves. And this is really, really important, that we need to have this talk. We need to think about it, like in the future as a storyteller. Okay, what is the best form to share this story, and not to make it in a patronizing way, or I don't know. Yeah, so these things always happen in conversations with them.
That question of how to best tell the story reminds me of what we always talk about at college, is who's your audience, who you're working with, and what's the best vehicle to tell that story. So perhaps just talk a little bit about why you use these different platforms or different dissemination devices. So you've got this very beautiful website. I really like the way that you're not using photography or photographs as the entry points into it, using these beautiful drawings. But you've also got books, and you've used the book format extensively throughout your career so far. So how are you sort of thinking through what are these different platforms? What do they do for you? So what does the multimedia website do for you, or film do for you? What does a book do for you? How do you sort of, in your own head, think about these different spaces, as it were, and then creatively, and I'm also very interested, I think, and I'm sure the audience will be as well, in the kind of process decisions that you have to make, working with designers, layout, editing, getting it published, all those kind of questions.
Yeah, so each of these different elements have a different target audience. So the website is for a really, really broad audience, more or less young, internet savvy, worldwide. That's why I made it also in English. Yeah. I was aiming to communicate this message as broadly as possible, taking from their own interests of communicating what they are. Then the book is for a narrower audience. So I have one copy of it here. It's for me, I really love books, and I love photography books especially. The problem is they are quite a niche market, and you cannot have them like printed in very big numbers, or they are quite expensive, so people are not so willing to buy them. And this book is for a narrower audience that is more or less interested in photography, interested in art, and so on and so forth. Yeah, the exhibition is the same, is for a narrower audience. So when I was working on this project, I thought, okay, yeah, I at the beginning I was only doing photography, but then with the complexity and everything, I said, okay, maybe I should also start recording audio. Maybe I should also start doing video. And then speaking with them and talking about internet and how they see technology, I said, okay, yeah, let's do a website together. Let's try that. I've never done it. This is the first time I did such a complicated thing. And it was also like a learning process to me. Like how can we tell stories in a different way? As photographers, we love books, but right now you see, like with all of this COVID crisis, books and in-person meetings are becoming a bit antiquated and a bit, now we only meet online. So maybe we can also use the online tools to communicate our photography stories.
I mean, I think it's interesting because, you know, multimedia has been around for quite a long time now, but actually very little has been done with it as a medium in terms of presenting work. I think there have been some interesting experiments, but, you know, if you think, you know, looking back all the way back to Gilles Perez's groundbreaking, talking of Fred Richin this morning, Gilles Perez and Fred Richin's collaboration with the Bosnia Uncertain Paths to Peace project, which was done in 1996, which is now, you know, ancient times, and yet it's still one of the most innovative and intelligent uses of non-narrative and non-linear storytelling. So it's kind of interesting that despite the fact everything now is digital, we still have only scratched the surface, I think, in terms of how we can use the affordances of that experience, that internet-based, web-based experience, to tell stories in new ways, in different ways. So I think it's good to see you trying to experiment with that and push with that and see where that takes you. And it'll be fascinating to see, as you said, how it grows and develops, and how the audience responds to it, but also probably more importantly, how the community responds to it and how they use it and how they kind of take it over organically themselves.
Yeah, and when I was developing this project, one of my dream target audiences would be also other communities around the world. So this is just an example of how you can use the new means of information to spread the word about your own message or your story. So perhaps, yeah, it could serve as an example, or they could like take elements from this and apply to their own realities and so on and so forth.
It's like a kind of template for community representation.
Yeah,
I think it's really, I think it is really interesting because so many of these, I mean, there are lots of projects that, you know, the great white hunter photographer comes in and tells the story of the indigenous, you know, poor people. And then there's other kind of the other end of it. There's the very participatory projects where you give them cameras and they tell their own stories. But somewhere in between the two of those, I think, is a space that perhaps you're beginning to explore that I think is really interesting, where, you know, you bring all of your skills as an image maker and as a documentarian, a storyteller, but you allow the community perhaps to dictate to you to an extent, or they tell their story through you. And I think that's a really interesting form of collaboration. But I can see that Karen's got quite a difficult question, which is kind of applies exactly to this really, is, you know, you're a fantastic image maker and you make great photographs. But in that, there is also this slight danger that if you look at them in isolation, that even though you are in some ways, you know, you have you have some cultural affinities and some connections, you're still always an outsider as well. And so how actively do you try to, within your own practice, kind of ask yourself that question of, you know, am I falling back on a cliche? Am I falling back on a trope in what I'm doing? And do you have anybody that you kind of use as a sounding board, I suppose, to just keep yourself in check when you're working like that?
Yeah, I always I always question myself, why am I doing what I am doing, and why did I went to Sarayaku in the first place if I'm not from Sarayaku, I'm Latino, but I'm not indigenous.
Exactly.
And, so it's always like it's always a really, really hard, complicated question. I always question myself. I always question the images I make, and when I edit, I always have like several people that I go to, whose opinions I really, really trust, because they can be really harsh and say, no, you're doing a cliche thing. Please don't show it. Or yes, okay, yeah, this is okay. And also in this project in particular, I work closely with Jose Miguel Santi, who is right now he's the head of the communications department of Sarayaku. And when I was, during this whole year, when I was developing the book, the website, I was showing him the pictures and always trying to argue with him. Like, please tell me if something is wrong. Please, like, if you don't see yourselves as I saw you, please do it. I mean, and gladly up until now, nothing has come out. So that he has been more or less like, yeah, okay with them. And also, like, I know he has showed it to other leaders, because as a community they are quite close and they work in collaboration. So I know that many people have seen it, and I know that they would have told me if I was doing anything wrong. So
you've been validated by the community effectively.
I mean, I almost never try to do that, because I try to be independent.
Right.
But I also am aware that in this topic, I mean, any mistake is quite a big mistake.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think we have to change. I think we have to, we have to move on from this idea that we know it all. We are these kind of arbiters of our own documentary practice, as it were, and we've got to open up to not necessarily critique, but we've certainly got to open up to the voices of other people and allow other people to have a voice in this, because we can't claim to be working in the best interests of our subjects if we don't let them have a voice in the process and some kind of say in how they're being represented. On the other hand, I think you're absolutely right that sometimes it does take that sensitive but outside eye to be able to connect and to see things that are not being seen. I mean, that's the classic photographic approach, isn't it? Is to point out, make things visible that other people wouldn't notice, and pick up on those subtle visual details that often pass us by.
Yeah, you're totally right. But it's always, for me, this photography is always a conversation. I tend to think a lot about what I do, and I tend to think a lot about my my photography heroes, what they do, why they do it, and try to criticize them in a good way, to think, how can we improve all of this? How can we I don't know, sometimes re-victimize people if we are covering a tragedy or something. And I think it is also important to listen to people outside the photography world, because sometimes we are really
absolutely
and then so about this project, I have spoken to anthropologists, or journalists, to ethnographers, and always with a lot of different points of view. Then you get like more or less something close to the truth, not the truth, but something close to it.
I mean, that's very interesting you should say that, because to come back to Gil Perez, and almost everything comes back to Gil Perez, if we're honest. He has this great quote about, doesn't believe in objectivity or truth, but he does believe in relentless self-doubt and relentless subjectivity. And through a process of constantly questioning what you're doing and how you're doing it, you do actually end up with some sort of authenticity, I suppose is maybe the best word for it, at the end of that process. So, you're not trying to pretend that you have an objective vision. It is intensely personal, but it's born out of a really deep, thoughtful process, rather than just a kind of a very superficial, instinctive reaction.
Yeah, I totally agree. In my work, I always say my view is really, really subjective, and yeah, it's my point of view. I may have prejudices, I may have like biases. Take it carefully. Yeah.
And I also think the point that you make about working with non-photographic allies, if you like, I think that's also really important. That's something I always say, not just to emerging photographers, but also really established ones. And it's kind of interesting how even photographers of my generation still find it difficult to break out of the straitjacket of looking for validation within the photographic, what I call the photographic ghetto, if you like, you know. And I think it's really important that we do that. And I think we really do have to look outside of this quite small little world of our own to justify and to validate what we do, despite the fact it's obviously great that, you know, we have a supportive community that we can work with. I think we also do have to look outside of that. And then maybe that just brings me back to the book. I know you held it briefly, but let's have a bit of a better look at it. How do you talk a bit about the process of making a book and how you go about that? You know, do you have an idea at the beginning of a project that you're going to make a book and make it in a particular way? And are you sort of shooting pictures that you think are going to work well in the book, or is it after the event? Or I mean, how do you work with the designer? And I think people are very interested in the process, as it were, of making a book.
Yeah, so it's quite a long process. Usually when I start a project, I never think of the book first. I only think about the project, and then the project starts to telling me what is the end product, if you will. So for this project, I was thinking, yeah, I'll do an essay, a photographic essay, and then we'll see. And then I got hooked up with it for 5 years and got a lot of information. So that's why, I decided, let's do the website, let's do the book, let's do the exhibition. And for the book, I worked with an editor, Claudia Carreras from Spain. And we worked around, I don't remember, like 8-9 months editing. Like last year, we started in August, we finished in February, more or less. No, we started earlier, sorry. And it was quite a painful process, of course, because as you imagine, like after 5 years, I had like a lot of material, a lot of photographs, and how do you compile them into a book? I mean, a book can only hold so many images, otherwise it's gonna get boring. And it was like really, really tough. And after that, during the book process, I was working with a design studio from here, from Ecuador, Studio Lunares. And I also, when I went to the community for the last time, I already knew that I wanted to do a book. So I was looking for graphic elements that could expand the narrative. So for instance, I met a wonderful woman who is an artisan there, and I asked her to draw some stuff. Beautiful. Like what she does.
And is the book in multiple languages? Because I can see the text there. Is that?
Yeah. So the book is in Quechua, in Spanish, and in English. So
that's wonderful. I think that's really important. I think one of the mistakes a lot of people make is they make a book in a language that the people who are in the book can't even read. Yes. And I think that's great that you've made it trilingual. That's really important.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So let's talk a bit about the cover, because I think that's a really interesting image and way of doing it. What was the inspiration to use that as the cover and do that beautiful sort of metallic effect?
Yeah, so when we were discussing with the designers on how we want to approach the book, I asked them to experiment and to not to do what people would expect from a book of the Amazon rainforest, if you know.
Yeah, right.
Like green colors, brown colors,
trees, rain, forest,
all that stuff. Yeah. So I said, okay, let's go out of there and think of other colors, other elements, other graphic elements. And so for this, they said that for them, Sarayaku is more or less like a society of the future. Could be a society, almost cyber society, where you are quite removed from the outside world. You depend on yourselves for hunting, for fishing, but you also have technology. And this, so they decided to render this 3D image of catfishes, which are quite common in the Amazon rainforest and are basic for the diet in the jungle, to render them as a cyber effect, more or less. And also, like with the book publisher, which is RM from Spain and Mexico, we decided to make it also to even like accentuate this feeling of cyber thing by doing it like this metallic cover and really hardcore. Also the colors. So the colors are like this gold and violet. The gold has like a reminiscence of the gold of the ancient indigenous peoples that was sacked during the Conquista and all of that stuff. It also reminds us of the colors of the sunset in the Amazon rainforest, which are more or less gold/purple. And the purple is a reminiscent of this dye that they use to paint their faces. It is black purplish, so that's why we use that color as well.
Great. I mean, those subtle details are really important and really interesting. And I think a bit like you said, you have your Easter eggs in the website. That I think with a book, it really does give you a chance to play with some of those things. And I think it is very important that design decisions are not purely aesthetic, that they are driven by some sort of logic, some kind of meaning. And I think you've done that really, really well in this book, that you can see how carefully you've thought through the aesthetics of the experience of looking at the book and how you've made them actually have some kind of meaning rather than simply, just be a visual for visual pleasure. Is that handwriting there on that?
No, so this is like one of the secrets of the book. It's not
okay.
It's not told, but I can tell you now. But it's not.
Sorry, we're giving away all the trade secrets here, but that's
this one. So when we were discussing also about how can we produce the book and what other elements can we include in the narrative, there was this interesting idea from the design studio that, okay, so if they use internet, the main language of the internet is the binary code. The binary code is compressed of ones and zeros, and then they decided to handwrite the ones and zeros of the phrases where the community presents themselves. So this phrase goes more or less, I don't remember quite exactly, it is written here, we are the descendants of the jaguar. So this phrase is throughout the book, and it is written as handwritten, but people, like when I show it, some people say, okay, maybe this is a primitive language or something like that, and it's right the opposite. It's the most contemporary.
Great. So we've got two questions here from David and Tim, which I'll kind of combine together, and then I'll come to Karen's question to end maybe. So one question is kind of, how is the blog? What are you expecting the blog to do and the content on that? And in a way, because that's about how you're going to spread out into the outer wide world, Tim Gauss's question is about how did the community respond to your wanting to spread their kind of their tacit knowledge, their understanding of the jungle and their ways of life at the beginning of this process.
Okay. So yeah, the blog, it is already managed by the communications department of Sarayaku, and they will be in charge of making the posts. I think I'm not sure if they will post in English. They don't manage English right well, so they will post in perhaps Quechua and of course in Spanish. This will be like news about the community, but most of them. So I spoke to the leader of the Young People's Association of Sarayaku, and they said, okay, we would like to post news about the younger generation. Like, I don't know, they have a football tournament, so they will post, okay, let's see who will play with whom. So like this kind of everyday news, and yeah, but I don't want to have any influence on that. So I don't manage the blog. The blog is not my part. It is entirely theirs. Yeah, that was part of the agreement. And yeah, so the community, they reacted quite well, actually. That was a really big concern for me all of the time. Because as I mentioned, I don't want to misrepresent them. And so up until now, I had like good comments about it. And it is also because I think they already know me for 5 years. I've been coming and going. Yeah, they
you
know
establish
that,
your trust. Yeah.
yes, they know that I won't do anything that to hurt them. Like, so yeah, and then I explain, okay, yes, I explain the same thing as I'm explaining here. You use internet, okay, let's use it together. Let's do a work together. And then they said, yeah, okay, let's do that. And also, like, since this is a collaborative project, I will also donate books to the community so that they can have in their schools, and the leaders can use them. I don't know, because they are quite active internationally. They go to the COP meetings, COP, these climate change meetings. I don't know, they can get a couple of copies and perhaps give it away to other people. They can make use of them as they wish, right? So yeah, they are really interested in their knowledge to be spread, because they don't want to disappear. That's this is one of the tools.
How have they been affected by COVID? I mean, are they managed to keep themselves, safe from the external world, as it were? I mean, obviously very connected to the outside world, but how have they managed to navigate that? And how is there anything in their experience as a community that's helped them defend themselves against it?
Yeah, so right now it's really hard. It's a really hard situation right there because of two factors. So there has been a lot of rain in the Amazon rainforest, like in their part of the Amazon. They said that it's a rain that they have never seen so much. So this is due to climate change. And this rain, what it did, it's like the main river, the Babonasa River that goes through their community. It had a lot of water, and a lot of houses were just completely demolished, and people lost their houses and belongings and so on and so forth. And and this was during the COVID times. And now I spoke to them on Friday or Saturday, I don't remember. And they told me that there are several members, around 20 of their community, that have tested positive for coronavirus in Sarayaku. Yeah, so it is quite worrying.
Which is quite high from that size of community.
Yeah, it's quite high, and a couple of elderly people have died already there in Sarayaku. So it's a quite worrying situation for them. What they told me is that they are trying to consume local plants, to start to experiment with local. But I mean, nothing is for sure. And some of them, even they decided to isolate themselves even stronger. So there's like the community center, but then you can, the territory is quite big. So they will travel with their boats really far away, and then stay in their
self-isolating effectively in their own.
Self-isolate in the jungle, in the middle of the jungle, and then just like eat, I don't know, hunt, fish, and all. Yeah, but
I thought it was really interesting, that point you made about them being these sort of traditional but also hyper modern communities. It's kind of a vision, possibly, and it's, in a way, that's kind of a vision of how we're living. A lot of people, they're living in these little safe social bubbles now, and gathering what resources you can from your immediate vicinity. It's kind of quite visionary in a way. So talking of being visionary, I mean, you've been incredibly productive in your career so far. You've always got multiple projects on the go, it seems. So just maybe to finish with Karen's question there, what else are you working on at the moment? Have you got some other projects kind of under development already, or in the pipeline, or ready to be coming forward?
Yeah. So right now, okay, I want to finish with Sarayaku first, but then I have in mind like a documentary, a film documentary that I am already producing. So I got really good news a couple of months earlier in this year that we got a grant to produce the film. So right now I'm incursioning in that. I've never done a film before, and then it's just amazing. And it has to do also with photography, but from a more subjective and from a more intimate point of view. So that was, I think it's quite right that I go into that, because it has to do a lot with photography.
Sounds
And
great,
then and then I'm also thinking about going to other indigenous places, because I'm really concerned with climate change and with environmental
of course,
things. And it's so when you see indigenous communities, they are the most affected for climate change, but they are the ones that are protecting the forests. So
absolutely.
it's quite,
and have all that knowledge, and
so it's a bit of like I don't know, it's a contradiction, I guess, because so right now I'm looking into that as well. Like there's one idea we have that hopefully I won't tell it right now, because I don't want to spoil it. But
great.
keep on working on that.
Great. Well, we're just finishing now. So I'll be really excited to see that film. I think it'd be really interesting to see how you transfer your photographic vision into filmmaking. So I'm very excited to see that. So thank you very much to everybody who attended today. I'd also just like to thank the Seven Agency and Academy for helping us host these talks with the Zoom platform. And also we have a discount code for you for promotion for our online workshops and seminars of 10%. And the code, as you can see there, is 7X Lumix 2020. So I've really enjoyed today's conversation, Misha. Thank you very much to Karen and Martin and the hosts from Lumix. Wish you well for the rest of the festival. And I'm also hosting a talk later in the week with Ilvi. So hopefully see some of you back for that. So thank you very much for everybody. And thank you, Misha, Karen and Martin, and hand over to you to close it down. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you both for this great talk and the inspiring insights and thoughts we came upon. You can find the link for Misha's multimedia project on our festival website, so if somebody came later. And yeah, tomorrow we will continue with the topic in crisis mode, which will give us different perspectives on the COVID-19 pandemic and general thoughts of working in a crisis. There will be a live talk with Espen Rasmussen, who started an intimate project called The Longest Day, and 2 video interviews on Instagram with Mari Galman from Russia and Raphael Heixler and Helena Lea Manatsberger from Hanover. So yeah, please also check out our podcast with Ingmar Björn Nolting. And thank you very much, everybody, for attending. And we hope you enjoyed our talk. And that we can welcome you another time in the next days. Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all also. And good luck with your festival. Thanks you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.